I want you to imagine the immense pressure on a modern pathologist today.
Oh, it is absolutely staggering.
Right. Because cancer rates are rising globally.
Right.
But at the exact same time, there is this worldwide shortage of pathologists.
Yeah, and thanks to new digital scanning technology, the actual volume of tissue samples being generated and needing analysis is just higher than ever before.
I mean, it is akin to standing at the end of an assembly line that just keeps speeding up, day after day.
Exactly.
And every single item on that line represents a literal life or death diagnosis.
That creates a massive bottleneck. I mean, the sheer volume of visual data being produced is completely outpacing human capacity.
Which is terrifying when you think about it.
It really is. We are talking about millions of high-resolution digital slides that require a human expert to sit down, scan across the tissue, zoom in on microscopic details, and just painstakingly map out cellular structures.
It's an unsustainable workload.
Totally unsustainable.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because that bottleneck is exactly why we are jumping into our deep dive today. We are looking at a really fascinating study published in Nature Partner Journals, and it's about a genuine holy grail in digital pathology.
The pan-cancer model.
Yes, building a single, universal artificial intelligence model that can automatically highlight cancerous regions across completely different types of cancer.
Without needing to be specially built for just one organ, which is a radical departure from the status quo.
How so?
Well, historically, AI in medicine has been heavily siloed. Like, you build an algorithm to find lung cancer, and it becomes an absolute expert in lung tissue.
Right.
But if you show that exact same AI a slide of prostate cancer, it is completely blind.
Wow.
Yeah, the architecture simply doesn't know what to look for outside of its highly specific training environment.
So to build this pan-cancer model like a truly universal diagnostic tool, the researchers really had to start with the data diet.
Exactly. The foundation of any machine learning model is what you feed it.
Because before an AI can diagnose a universal concept of cancer, it needs to be fed a massive, highly curated data set.
And they did just that. They compiled over 20,000 whole slide images.
We'll just call those WSIs for short.
Right, WSIs. And these were gathered from over 4,300 different patients.
But if I'm trying to teach a machine a universal rule, I can't just dump raw hospital data into a server.
Right. Absolutely not. You have to be incredibly strategic about what types of cancer you include.
So what did they choose?
They anchored the training data on 4 specific carcinomas. So that's colorectal, endometrial, lung, and prostate cancer.
Okay. But doesn't that introduce an immediate problem?
Oh, it definitely does.
Because in the real world, and in these raw data pools hospitals have, you might have, I don't know, thousands of samples of lung cancer, but only a tiny fraction of that for endometrial cancer.
Yeah, which brings up the classic machine learning trap class imbalance.
Right. If you feed an AI 10 times as much lung tissue as endometrial tissue, it's naturally going to optimize for the lung tissue just to get the highest overall score.
Exactly. It becomes completely biased toward the majority class. It gets lazy, basically.
So how did they fix that?
To prevent that bias, the researchers actively oversampled the minority groups on a tissue section level.
Meaning they forced a perfect balance?
Yes. They forced a perfect balance in the data set, so there were exactly 3,519 tissue sections per cancer type fed into the model.
Oh, wow. So by giving the AI equal exposure to all 4 diseases, they prevented it from just, memorizing the visual quirks of lung tissue.
Precisely.
So for you listening, think of it like training a master chef. If you want someone to understand the universal principles of cooking, you don't just have them bake 10,000 loaves of bread and grill 5 steaks.
Right, you balance the curriculum.
Exactly. You teach them the fundamental chemistry of how heat breaks down proteins, or how yeast ferments. That way they can walk into literally any kitchen in the world and intuitively know what to do.
That is a great analogy.
But this makes me wonder, does a generalist AI lose the specific microscopic nuances that a specialist AI would have?
Like a jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none situation.
Yeah. If it's forced to learn 4 different organs, does it just become mediocre at all of them?
Well, what's fascinating here is it doesn't lose a step.
Really?
Yeah. The researchers actually tested this directly. They built 4 separate specialized AI models.
Yeah.
So one exclusively for lung, one exclusively for prostate, and so on.
Okay.
And then they pitted those specialists against this new pan-cancer generalist model. The generalists performed just as well, and in some metrics, actually better than the specialists.
Oh, wow. So because the combined data pool was so massive and varied, It basically forced the AI to look past the organ-specific architecture.
Yes.
And it had to find the underlying visual signatures of cancer itself, like cellular chaos, or the breakdown of cell walls, or those nuclear aberrations that are just common to all tumors.
That's exactly it. A narrowly trained single cancer model might latch onto some harmless visual artifact in lung tissue and mistakenly think it's a tumor feature.
Oh, I see.
But the generalist model naturally strips away that noise because it has to find the common denominator across 4 radically different environments.
Okay, so let's do a quick mini recap for the listener just to lock in what we've covered in these first few minutes.
Good idea.
Bullet point 1, pathology is severely bottlenecked, so AI needs to step in to save the day.
Right. And bullet point 2. Instead of building single organ specialists, they trained a universal model on 4 distinct cancers using over 20,000 perfectly balanced images.
And point 3. This generalist approach proved that a single AI can master multiple cancers without sacrificing specialist-level accuracy.
That is the foundation, yes. But understanding that it works is very different from understanding how a computer physically ingests and processes something this large.
Right. Let's look under the hood at the anatomy of this algorithm, because a whole slide image is not a standard JPEG that you snap on your phone.
No, not even close. These files are gigantically dense.
Like, how big are we talking?
We are talking about dimensions up to 100,000 by 100,000 pixels.
That is insane.
It is. If you zoom all the way in on one of these digital slides, you are literally looking at individual structures inside the nucleus of a single cell.
So it's an astronomical amount of pixels. I'm assuming no graphics card on Earth can process that entire image at full resolution all at once.
Exactly. So the AI first downsamples the image slightly to a working resolution of 1 micrometer per pixel.
Okay.
But even then, the image is way too vast. So the core mechanism they rely on is tiling.
Tiling. Okay, so they chopped the massive slide into a grid of smaller overlapping tiles.
Yes, specifically tiles that are exactly 7,680 by 7,680 pixels.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you listening. Think of this tiling mechanism like mapping the world using satellite photography.
Oh, perfect analogy.
Right. You cannot process a high-resolution picture of the entire globe at once and expect to spot a specific cluster of pine trees in Canada.
You crash the computer.
Exactly. So you analyze a 10-mile grid, you identify a forest, then you move to the next overlapping grid, identify a river, and then you digitally stitch all those individual grids together to make a seamless map.
That is exactly how the neural network approaches the tissue. And the tool doing the heavy lifting on each of those tiles is an encoder-decoder setup.
Let's break that down.
Specifically, they utilized an NFNet encoder and a DeepLab V3 plus decoder, and this entire network has over 7.3 million adjustable parameters.
Okay, I want to pause on the NFNet encoder for a second because that is a very specific architectural choice.
It is.
Because in traditional machine learning, models usually rely on batch normalization, right?
Yes, normally they do.
Meaning they look at a large batch of images, say 256 tiles at a time, and they basically average out the mathematical noise across that batch to keep the learning process stable.
Right. It's like grading a massive class of students on a curve to smooth out the anomalies.
Exactly. But if these tiles are nearly 8,000 pixels wide, you cannot fit a batch of 256 into GPU memory. You're probably feeding them in batches of what, like 2, 4?
You've hit on the exact hardware constraint. You can only feed a very small batch of these massive tiles into the memory at once.
And if you average a class of 2 students, the curve is totally meaningless.
Exactly. If you try to run traditional batch normalization on a batch size of 2 or 4, the math becomes wildly unstable. The averages just swing too violently.
So how does the NFNet fix this?
Well, NFNet stands for Normalizing Free Network. It is designed from the ground up to fundamentally skip that batch averaging step entirely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it maintains mathematical stability internally, which allows it to extract features incredibly well even when hardware limits you to those tiny batches.
Okay, so that solves the memory bottleneck on the front end. The NFNet encoder shrinks the image down, identifying the crucial features and patterns.
Right.
Then it hands that dense data off to the decoder, the DeepLab V3 plus IFAG. And if the encoder is finding features, the decoder's job is to rebuild those features back into a spatial map, right?
Exactly. DeepLab is famous for semantic segmentation.
Which means understanding not just what an object is, but exactly where its borders are.
Yes. DeepLab V3 Plus is excellent at this because it can analyze the contextual information at multiple scales simultaneously.
So it doesn't just look at a tiny cluster of cells.
No, it looks at the broader neighborhood of tissue around those cells to make a much more informed decision.
Okay, so the network analyzes every single tile, and then comes the reconstruction phase. The AI scores every tile, and to prevent those ugly artificial seams where the tiles meet like a bad panorama photo on your phone where someone has two heads.
Yeah, we want to avoid that.
So it uses distance-weighted overlaps. It blends the edges of the tiles together based on how close they are to the center of the grid.
Which creates a massive, smooth probability heat map.
And that heat map assigns a probability score from 0 to 1 for every single pixel, right?
Right. 0 means the AI is certain it's healthy tissue. A 1 means absolute certainty of cancer.
But a surgeon or a pathologist doesn't want a blurry, blended heat map when they're trying to understand the borders of a tumor. They need a definitive, hard boundary.
They need to know exactly where to cut.
Right. So the final step of the pipeline is a post-processing technique to clean up the map, which they call hysteresis thresholding.
Hysteresis thresholding is brilliant because it uses 2 thresholds instead of 1.
How does that work?
The model essentially says, okay, if a region has a probability above 90%, I am definitively marking it as a tumor. That is my anchor.
Makes sense.
Now, if a neighboring region has a lower probability, say it's somewhere between 33% and 90%, I will only mark it as a tumor if it is physically touching that 90% anchor region.
Okay, it's like a localized weather system. For you listening, imagine this. If you have a massive confirmed hurricane, that's the 90% anchor, and a smaller storm cell nearby, you just assume they are part of the exact same system.
Right.
But if there's just a faint 40% probability cloud floating completely on its own in the middle of a clear blue sky, you dismiss it as noise.
Perfect analogy. And the final result of that is a stark black and white binary mask. Black is healthy background, white is the definitive tumor.
Okay, so it cleans up the scattered low probability noise perfectly. But as you might suspect, that exact cleanup mechanism creates a really unique vulnerability.
It definitely does.
Because what happens if that post-processing filter accidentally scrubs out a real but very faint signal?
Yeah.
Like, what if the AI is 60% sure it's cancer, but because it's physically isolated and doesn't touch a 90% anchor, the hysteresis thresholding just erases it completely?
Well, that vulnerability was exposed almost immediately during their real-world validation.
Okay, before we dive into how they validated this, let's do our second mini recap. Let's map out the pipeline we just discussed.
Go for it.
Bullet 1. We take a massive digital slide, downsample it slightly, and chop it into overlapping 7,000 pixel tiles.
Bullet 2. We run those tiles through a batch norm-free NFNet encoder and a deep lab spatial decoder utilizing 7.3 million parameters.
And bullet 3. We stitch the tiles back together, blend the edges into a heat map, and finally snap that heat map to a stark binary mask using that dual threshold hysteresis.
That is the complete architecture, beautifully summarized.
Thank you. So they took this fully trained system, right? And unleashed it on independent validation datasets comprising over 3,000 new patients.
Yes. And to really test the universal nature of the model, they threw a massive curveball at it. Breast cancer.
Which is absolutely crucial because the AI had never seen a single breast cancer slide during its entire training phase.
Not one.
Its diet was strictly colorectal, endometrial, lung, and prostate.
And yet, when faced with an entirely unseen organ, it achieved a Dice similarity coefficient, or DSC, of over 80%.
And just to clarify, the Dice similarity coefficient is basically an overlap metric, right?
Yes, exactly.
It measures how perfectly the AI's predicted tumor boundary overlaps with the true human-drawn boundary. So scoring over 80% on an alien tissue type is an absolute triumph.
It's incredible. And for the endometrial cancer validation, it scored an unbelievable greater than 90%.
Wow. So it successfully took the universal rules of cancer it learned and just applied them anywhere.
It did. But we really have to talk about the bladder anomaly.
Ah, yes. The failure.
Because while it triumphed in breast tissue, it spectacularly stumbled on a dataset called VUR1.
And what kind of cancer was that?
That consisted of urothelial carcinoma of the bladder. The DSC accuracy score plummeted to around 50%.
Ouch.
Even worse, in 33% of those specific scans, the AI found absolutely 0 tumors. It literally looked at cancerous tissue and essentially said, nothing to see here.
Okay, so why did it fail so badly on the bladder? Does bladder cancer just look fundamentally different from everything else?
Actually, it comes back to the exact vulnerability you pointed out earlier with the hysteresis thresholding.
The erasing of faint signals.
Exactly. The biological appearance wasn't the main issue. The physical state of the tissue was. These specific bladder samples were collected through a procedure called a transurethral resection, or TUR.
Wait, a transurethral resection isn't a neat, clean slice of tissue like you'd get from a standard biopsy or a major organ removal.
No, it is not.
You're using a wire loop to basically scrape the tumor off the inside of the bladder wall.
Exactly. So the samples in this data set were not solid, contiguous blocks of tissue. They were a fragmented, cauterized salad of tissue bits.
Oh, wow.
Furthermore, these were mostly early-stage cancers, clinically staged as PTA.
What does that mean visually?
Well, PTA are non-invasive papillary tumors that grow like tiny mushrooms. And there were also PTAs, which is flat carcinoma, in situ.
So the tumor was actually there, but the tissue was physically mangled, fragmented, and the cancer itself was very early in its development.
Yes. And when researchers looked at the raw probability heat map generated by the AI, before that final cleanup step, the neural network actually did detect the tumor.
It saw it.
It saw it. There was a faint signal. But because the signal was low confidence due to the fragmented tissue and physically isolated from any 90% anchor, that strict histopathological thresholding literally erased the cancer during the final cleanup step.
Wow. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this really highlights a critical limit of where medical AI is currently sitting.
It really does.
This pan-cancer model is perfectly tuned for solid, en-bloc resections, meaning large, intact chunks of tissue removed during major surgery. But it struggles deeply with fragmented biopsies.
Right. And the obvious reaction from anyone looking at this is, well, just lower the threshold, make the post-processing more sensitive.
And he could do that, right?
You can. And the researchers proved you can do exactly that. If you simply lower those post-processing thresholds, the AI suddenly finds the bladder cancer and the accuracy jumps all the way up to an 89% DSC.
Okay, but what's the catch?
It is a delicate, dangerous balancing act. If you make the AI hypersensitive just to catch every faint whisper of cancer in a fragmented biopsy, you risk creating false positives everywhere else in the perfectly healthy tissue.
Right, it's like turning up the volume on your stereo to hear a really quiet conversation in a recording, but suddenly the background hiss of the room just becomes deafening.
Perfect way to put it. You are constantly trading specificity for sensitivity.
Okay, let's do our third mini recap, tracking the results of the ultimate test.
Here we go.
Bullet 1. The AI successfully recognized breast cancer without any prior training, proving it really did learn universal cancer traits.
Bullet 2. Overall accuracy was excellent, usually above 80 to 90% overlapping with human doctors.
And bullet 3. It failed on fragmented early-stage bladder cancer because its built-in safety thresholds erased the weak, isolated signals.
Which naturally leads us to evaluate the human element.
Yes, let's go there.
Knowing the AI has these blind spots with tiny fragments, how does its overall robustness actually compare to human doctors and, the messy reality of real-world hospital equipment?
Because hardware robustness is a massive deal in digital pathology. Every hospital uses different brands of digital scanners.
Oh, yeah. Totally different ecosystems.
Some use the Aperio AT2, some use the NanoZoomer XR or the KF-Puro 400. And beyond the scanners, different labs use slightly different chemical concentrations for their staining.
The H&E staining, yeah.
Which means a slide from a lab in New York might look much pinker or bluer than a slide from London.
Well, the researchers tested the AI against this exact variance using cohorts from external labs like the Cancer Genome Atlas.
And how did it hold up?
The result was amazing. The performance didn't drop at all.
Really?
Yeah, the model was incredibly robust to real-world technical variations in color profiles and scanner hardware. It also vastly outperformed a general medical foundation model called MedSam.
Okay, let's contextualize MedSam for you listening. That is the medical segment anything model.
Right.
It's essentially a massive general-purpose AI for medical images that usually requires a human to, draw a bounding box around a region of interest just to prompt it.
Yes.
But this new specialized pan-cancer model blew MedSam out of the water on this task, right?
It did, largely because a fine-tuned, specialized architecture with 7.3 million parameters dedicated solely to the microscopic chaos of tissue will naturally outperform a generalist model, even when that general model is given a bounding box hint.
Makes total sense.
But honestly, the most revealing part of the entire study was the pathologist showdown.
Oh, yes. They ran this incredible experiment using the breast cancer dataset, comparing the AI's annotations directly against two expert human pathologists.
We'll call them pathologist MP and pathologist LV.
Okay.
First, they established a baseline by testing intra-observer variability.
Meaning how much a single doctor agrees with themselves over time.
Exactly. Pathologist MP meticulously annotated a set of slides. Then, 2 years later, without looking at his previous work, he re-annotated the exact same slides.
Okay.
He agreed with his past self 91% of the time.
Which makes sense. Human beings aren't perfectly consistent robots. You know, our mood, our fatigue, our recent case history, all of that influences how we draw a boundary.
Right.
But here is the real kicker. How closely did the AI agree with pathologist MP?
The AI agreed with him 88% of the time.
Which is incredibly close to his own 91%.
It really is. And to put that 88% into perspective, they had the second human doctor, pathologist LV, annotate the exact same slides.
Yeah.
Pathologist LV only agreed with pathologist MP 77% of the time.
Oh, wow. So what does this all mean? The AI actually agreed with the original human doctor more than a second expert human doctor did.
You did.
But I have to push back on this a little bit.
Go for it.
Does this mean the AI actually discovered some objective universal biological truth about where the cancer begins and ends? Or did it just learn to brilliantly mimic the specific psychological style of the doctor who trained it? Because all of that original training data was labeled by pathologist MP.
That is such a vital consideration in supervised machine learning, and you're absolutely right to challenge it.
Thank you.
The AI learns the exact ground truth it is fed. It doesn't inherently learn an objective biological reality called cancer. It learns cancer exactly as defined by pathologist MP. The network basically adopted his specific aggressive or conservative tendencies in drawing tumor boundaries. It is fundamentally a highly complex mirror reflecting its human teacher.
Which is simultaneously amazing and, I don't know, a little bit terrifying.
It really is.
Let's synthesize all of this.
Yep.
We started with the massive bottleneck in pathology. Millions of slides. Not enough doctors to review them.
Yeah.
What this study definitively proves is that a single pan-cancer AI model can successfully identify tumors across multiple organs.
It proves that despite how differently a lung tumor and a breast tumor behave clinically, they share universal visual signatures at a microscopic level that a neural network can actually isolate.
It handles the color variants of different hospital scanners effortlessly, and it can act as a massive time saver for overwhelmed medical systems.
Right. It still struggles with tiny, fragmented biopsies like those TOR procedures, relying really heavily on how we tune those hysteresis thresholds. But the foundation of a generalist model is remarkably solid.
So it's no longer a matter of if AI will sit next to pathologists, but exactly how it will be deployed to assist them.
Absolutely.
And this raises a really important question for you, the listener, to mull over as we wrap up today.
Think about this. If a supervised AI can generalize what cancer looks like across the human body better than two expert doctors can agree on a single slide, what happens when we stop forcing the AI to mimic humans?
Oh, wow.
What happens when we transition to unsupervised learning and we just let the AI define the boundaries of a tumor entirely on its own, based purely on raw pixel data?
Could it eventually spot faint precancerous visual patterns that the human eye simply hasn't evolved to see yet?
Exactly.
I mean, it's entirely possible that right now, hidden in those 100,000 pixel digital images are the microscopic secrets to catching cancer months or even years earlier.
We just need to build the right machine to look at them.
And maybe to stop telling the machine exactly what to look for. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Keep questioning the consensus and keep exploring the invisible patterns in the world around you.